Good afternoon and welcome back to the 10th Foot YouTube channel. My name is Lenny Torto. I'm an officer in His Majesty's 10th Regiment of Foot, and we're here today to talk about pretty much standard equipment that an officer in 1775 would have in Boston before and during the beginning of the American Revolution.
Officers, the gentlemen leaders of soldiers on the battlefield. In a British regiment of foot, these men ranged in rank from ensigns all the way up to colonels, and higher still once they rose beyond the confines of a single regiment. Officership and commissioning today has evolved significantly since the 18th century. Historically, officers purchased their commissions. This meant that, regardless of tactical skill, a man with sufficient wealth could buy his way into a command position. We will be releasing videos that explore the roles of officers both on and off the battlefield in greater detail in the future, so stay posted. Officers were also responsible for buying their own clothing, which set them apart from enlisted men. Their uniforms were also a considerable step up from the issued clothing of common soldiers, as you will see in the following informational video featuring Captain Torto of the Grenadier Company.
So I'm going to start right now at the bottom and work our way up. There's a lot of kit here. An officer would have brought a lot of his own personal baggage, personal effects from home. They did not usually get standard issued equipment that the other soldiers had. It was all primarily private purchase, so it was always of much, much better quality. So yeah, let's get started. These are a pair of 18th century buckle shoes. They have latchets and buckles to keep the shoe on the foot. They're made of all leather. Had to be comfortable because you did a lot of marching in these. Contrary to popular opinion, British officers did not wear riding boots everywhere. If they were on horseback, on a leisurely day off, they would have their riding boots, but when marching with the army, they were in shoes and primarily these gaiters. Now, these gaiters are made out of canvas. They've been painted and polished. Gaiters were blackened with something called black ball, which is a mixture of wax and a black pigment, and it was very difficult to use, but it was very effective in keeping the gaiters waterproof. In wintertime, the men would have had these woolen leggings to keep their legs warmer. Basically the same thing as a gaiter, only made of wool and longer. These will stretch up over the knee. Woolen socks underneath it all to keep your feet warm and dry. These are 100% wool, but they would have been hand woven with a seam up the back. This particular pair doesn't seem to have them. And to keep the socks in place, you'd have a pair of leather garters. The men's were normally about an inch wide. These are a little bit smaller because as an officer, I don't have a plain brass buckle. These are sterling silver and it will only take a half-inch garter. So, I mean, it didn't have to be so standardized for an officer. Woolen breeches, pretty standard article of clothing, closed at the bottom with buttons and breeches buckles. Next would be a linen shirt with a ruffle at the breast and with ruffles at the cuffs. And of course, these were held together with sleeve buttons, knot buttons, just pretty much ovals linked together, which then keep the ends of your sleeves linked together and closed. And sometimes you would also have a pin at the breast to keep this breast opening closed. They would have a special pin, sometimes in the shape of a heart. Yeah, that's pretty much the undergarments. These shirts also served like underwear. They were quite warm and they would just be tucked up underneath everything. The next thing would be a waistcoat. So here we have an officer's waistcoat. This one is trimmed with silver lace, pretty standard silver buttons on it with the number 10, regimental number 10. Then the next thing you would put on is your stock. So we have a stock here, very stiff, with a silver buckle on the back. And this is going to go up around the neck, like so. This one's made out of velvet. The men's were made from horsehair, pretty much similar construction. Probably the men's weren't as stiff as this one. This one has a nice thick piece of leather in it to keep it upright. When an officer was on duty, he's going to be wearing his sash. So here we have an officer's sash wrapped around the waist. This sash is made out of silk, and it's one of the symbols that shows that an officer is on duty. That and his silver gorget. These two items meant A, that you were an officer, and B, that you were currently on duty with your battalion. Coats. Officers' coats were made not from the madder red wool that the men wear, but of scarlet wool, the superfine, which means it's a much, much higher quality. These would have been made by his private tailor. The buttonholes have silver lace around them. That's these little rectangles that surround the buttonholes, also with 10 silver buttons marked 10. Well, this regimental lace is made from silver bullion wire, unlike the men's and the sergeants', which is made out of worsted wool tape. The other thing on an officer's coat, on this particular coat, I have 2 epaulets on it. Most coats, officers' coats, would have had only one because they would have been worn by battalion company officers. There were 8 battalion companies in a British regiment. The other 2 companies in a 10-company regiment were the flank companies. One was grenadiers and one was light infantry. And because we are wearing belts and carrying a cartridge pouch along with our sword and bayonet, we needed the extra epaulets on the shoulders. So you can see this coat has 2 epaulets on it, one on each side. This is a silver gorget. It's a reduction of when knights wore a piece of armor to protect their throats. So this matriculated down to an ornamental symbol that an officer was on duty. This gorget is modeled after one in a painting of Captain Thomas Hewitt, who was an officer in the 10th Regiment of Foot Light Infantry Company. It has the King's coat of arms on it, has the GR. It's marked with 10th Regiment, the Roman numeral X for the 10. And that and the sash means an officer is on duty, made out of solid silver. Some officers would wear wigs. Some officers would wear just their natural hair. This wig could use a dressing. My wigs have the older style side curls. Many of the officers and men in the regiment abandoned the side curls later on in the war because it was just much easier to keep the hair dressed without having to bother to put side curls on. There's a queue in the back. Mine is just a very long queue wrapped in a satin ribbon with a bow at the end. The men would normally have their hair either clubbed or queued. A club is just the way the hair is fashioned. It's kind of rolled up and held in place with a ribbon, whereas a queue is braided. It's a braid that they tuck up underneath their caps. Now in the Grenadiers, this is the iconic British Grenadiers cap. Pretty much the same as every cap in the Army that the Grenadiers wear. This one would have been made from a higher quality privately by the officer. The difference would have been probably a better grade of bearskin, and also, unlike the privates and the sergeants, the cording on the back of this cap is made from silver bullion cord, and it has silver bullion tassels on it, where the men's would have been just plain cotton cording on theirs, or linen cording. Also have a cocked hat, which I would have worn off-duty. Much lighter and more convenient to wear than my bearskin. Again, though, with silver bullion lace, some decorative tasseling on it. This is made from an animal fur that was processed, blocked into shape, and then shellacked to keep it waterproof. Very expensive, a piece of privately owned officer's kit. Then I think we can go on to things that an officer would wear on top of his uniform. Even on campaign, officers might have a haversack. This is a linen bag which an officer might keep his private effects in. Normally, the men were issued these and they would be given out daily with food rations in it, where an officer would probably be a part of a British officer's mess, and would be fed with his messmates, with the other officers in the regiment. This one's marked with the GR and the arrow. This is like a Board of Ordnance mark on here. It shows that it's a piece of royal property. Belting. Okay, the belting is, of course, what sustains your equipment, like your cartridge box, your bayonet, the sword. I have some different types of belting here. This belt is a single frog belt, meaning it only has one receptacle for either a sidearm or a sword, but it has the regimental buckle on it with the X. This is also seen in the painting by Tate of a British officer in 1783. I have a second belt here, which is a double frog. This one will carry not only the bayonet for my fusel, but also has a spot for my sword. And with this belt, I just have a plain silver buckle on it. Then we have the cartridge box. A cartridge box is just what it says. It holds cartridges for the fusel. And it's marked with a cartridge box device of the 10th Regiment of Foot. Mine is silver plated because I am an officer, where the enlisted men, theirs would be solid brass. This will hold 26 rounds of ammunition. Really, officers in flank companies and sergeants very rarely fired their weapons. Their job wasn't to shoot at the enemy, but to command their companies. But it was deemed that flank company officers should have fusils, which is a short musket, more for self-protection than for anything else. And those were also privately purchased by the officer. It was not issued by the Army. Pretty standard canteen, made out of tin with a hemp cord. I like to keep water in mine. Some things that an officer would have: he'd carry his pocket watch on a fob. He'd have some little trinkets at the bottom, just little decorations. He might have a snuff box with him, which is filled with snuff, which is really scented tobacco. British officers were armed in the 18th century with a number of different weaponry. This is a British officer's sword from the 18th century. It was a private purchase. This one particularly nice. It still retains some of the bluing on it, and it features engraving here, decorative engraving, the crown, the cipher of George III. On this side, it has the King's coat of arms. This one is gilded, so it was gold-plated. Even though the 10th Regiment of Foot was a silver regiment, and most of the metal on the officers is either solid silver or silver-plated. This original sword, I did not want to alter its original finish, so this one still has its gold plating on it. In the British Army, there were two types of regiments. There were silver regiments and gold regiments, and basically it just meant what the color of the officer's hardware was. So as you can see, in the 10th, we're a silver regiment, so silver gorget, silver buttons, silver lace. A gold regiment would have been gold gorget, gold buttons, gold lace. Really just depended on what the colonel of the regiments back then decided, or what the government decided they wanted that particular regiment to be. Totally opposite, this sword, which is very delicate, it's well balanced, is a grenadier's hanger. And I have one right here. This thing's a monster. It weighs about twice as much as my sword. It's much shorter. It has a monster head on it. This weapon was made for hacking people to pieces. These were actual reproductions of the hanger that was lost by a British grenadier of the 10th Regiment of Foot during the retreat from Concord. We had these made with the number of the regiment engraved on them. It was quite a big project, but we were so happy that we did it. These attach to the belt pretty much like my bayonet does. As you can see, there's a little prong right here, but you can see it here on my bayonet. And that holds the scabbard into the carriage. Now, the other thing that grenadier officers and light infantry officers carried was a fusil. Now, a fusil is a smaller musket, okay? This would have been a private purchase also. Fusils primarily, back in England, an officer would use to go hunting, bird hunting, but they needed something just for self-protection. And here's the difference between a fusil, the size, and a regular musket. So the musket, which is a second land pattern Brown Bess, is about 6 inches longer than this one. These would have been much lighter, much more nimble for the officer to carry. Officers were there to command their men, not to fire at the enemy. So, I mean, they had their hands full just commanding men in the field. It was the men's job to do the shooting. So here's the difference between the fusil and the musket. So I just want to show you that British officers, because of their social position, had the opportunity to have more than just a standard regimental uniform. They would have off-duty clothing. So here's just some of the clothing that they may have had with them. Maybe a fancy waistcoat like this. This waistcoat was a light infantry officer's waistcoat that I wore when I was an officer in the light infantry. That was back in the late 80s. So officers of light infantry, they would wear a red waistcoat as opposed to the white waistcoat that the battalion and grenadier officers would wear. Here's another off-duty garment, older style, probably from the 1760s, but I'm old, so I feel I have the age to wear an older style of clothing. This is my off-duty frock coat, definitely something probably from the French and Indian War, with the slash cuff, the big laced pockets, no facings, and a little bit of fancy lace on the back. Again, I'll wear this when I'm not on duty. You know, just to have a change of garment. I mean, who wants to show up with the same old clothes on all the time? Well, thank you for joining us today as we discuss the basic standard kit of British infantry officers in 1775. Of course, every officer would have brought their own kit and with their own style. Not everybody came out of a cookie cutter. Again, a pleasure having you with us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event or at the next video. Have a good day.